Hi guys, welcome back to Over Easy Acres. It is officially fall. The mornings are chilly now. I have to kind of go out into the garden later in the day, and the garden is just not doing as much right now. Still waiting on some tomatoes to ripen. So I had an idea today that I'm going to take you inside and we're going to make apple hand pies, apple Pop-Tarts, apple deliciousness, apple pastries, whatever you want to call them. It is apple season, it's spice season, it's all the cozy comfort foods. These are a great snack, great dessert, hey, great breakfast. So you come on inside and let's make them together. The recipe I'm going to show you ends up making 18 tarts, about maybe 3 by 3 inches. So if you want more or less, then you just can adjust your recipe accordingly. It's not real picky. I used 5 apples. It seems like a lot, but by the time that you chop them and cook them and reduce them down, I had a little bit too much, which didn't hurt anybody's feelings because then they could just snack on that while the tarts were cooking. But that's how many I used. So I peeled my 5 apples, and here you can see I'm just quartering them and removing all the core. Nobody likes to get any little tiny bit of core in there. It's disgusting, so make sure it's completely out. Then I very thinly slice this. Now, if I was making a pie, of course I would not make these pieces so small, but because you want them to fit into your tart, you need really small pieces. So I just diced these. You can do them whatever size you like, but dicing is just a really good size. Here's what I added to them. I did butter, about a 1/4 cup for this. Then I sprinkled maybe about a teaspoon of cinnamon. And then I drizzled some honey over, probably maybe 2 tablespoons, and I let them simmer on the stove for a little bit, stirring them so that the juices could be released, and I did cover them. Okay, well, this is just on the stove getting soft. I'm gonna go make the crust. The recipe that is my tried and true for pastry crust, for pies, whatever it is, comes from my mom, which comes from my grandma. And the recipe is 3-1-1. So I'm using 3 cups of flour here, and I do spoon that into the cup. Then 1 teaspoon of sea salt. And then I make sure that that's completely combined. So you really want to stir that around first so you don't get any salt pockets in your dough, so just stir it up. And then 1 cup of butter. So 3 cups flour, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 cup butter. So 3-1-1. Now, best hack ever is to grate your butter because you want it to be nice and cold. You want it to stay cold the whole time that you're working. And if you ever feel like it's getting just too room temperature or too soft, you can always just pop it into the fridge or into the freezer for a few minutes. But by the time you're doing this, mine was still plenty cold. Just grate it all in. You can see there's big butter flakes. They kind of look like cheese. And then I'm just going to toss it with the flour. And here you can see that I'm working it through my hands because I want that butter to be a little bit smaller. Not totally so that you can't see it, but kind of pea-sized, I guess it would be, so that it has those pockets of butter. So when it hits the air temperature that's really hot in your oven, it'll melt those and it will cause your pastry to expand. So yeah, here you can just see that it's a nice uniform consistency, and that will be just perfect. So here I'm going to add my cold water to it. I ended up using about a cup, if not a little bit more of water, but I only use a little bit at a time because you can always add more water, but you can't take it back, and you don't want a wet crust. You don't want a dry one either, but you want the water and the flour to be able to incorporate together so that you know if you need more water. And here I don't want to overwork the dough. Again, I don't want to make the butter disintegrate, become too small, so I'm carefully handling it. It's a nice soft dough. Okay, I finished rolling out the crust. Well, not rolling it up, but making the crust like you just saw. And now these apples are fairly tender. I'm not worried about that they're not all the way tender because they will cook a little bit more in the oven, but the juice is mostly gone, so I don't want to keep cooking them until they're dry, just until the juice is absorbed, and then it's just a nice filling texture, so they taste delicious to me, so I think they're perfect. I'm just gonna let them cool though, because I don't want to put them hot on my crust or it's gonna melt all the butter in it, so I'm gonna let this cool just for a little bit, and then we'll roll out the crust. Now it almost looks crazy, the amount of flour that I am pouring out here onto the counter, but you want a really floured countertop because not only do you need to roll out your crust, but you also have to fill your pastries and then be able to pick them up again. So here I'm just going to pat my dough into a square in this case because of the shape that I want for my Pop-Tarts. So I'm just making sure it's in a square. I'm going to flip it up, reflour the bottom, and then put it back down so that nothing sticks again. And I'm just going to keep repeating this process until I get the dough large enough. I want it to be down to maybe like an 1/8 inch thick by the end, 1/4 to an 1/8 inch, not as thin maybe as for a pie crust because you do have to hold these and they don't have a structure in a pan. But you do want to make sure that it's well floured the whole time you're working. So I'm just going to press the dough out little by little. I like to stop and check that it's not sticking in any spot because it's super frustrating if it sticks and then you go to pick up your tarts and they're all stuck and then you have a big old mess all over your counter. So just take it from me, more flour is better. It won't be too much flour. So I just keep rolling it down, lifting up, making sure that it's not stuck and get it into a nice shape that I feel like is thin enough but for getting 18 out of it, but it's also thick enough that they won't lose their structure because again, this is a hand pie. You're not eating it with a fork. You want to be able to pick it up at the end. So here you're going to need something to cut your dough with. You can have a fancy pie cutter type of thing, or you can use a pizza cutter. If you didn't have either, really you could use a knife. I just find like a pizza cutter or a roller type of a thing. It just makes it really easy to make nice strips here. You kind of want to think ahead of how much dough do you have and how can you divide it. I had enough, again, like I said, for 18. I made these a little smaller than I normally would, maybe for a dessert, but I wanted these as a snack that could pack along or just be a kind of small treat that I didn't feel was like dessert worthy. So here my apples have cooled down enough that I'm not worried about them melting the butter in the crust. And so I'm putting in maybe about 1.5 tablespoons of filling. It seems really small, but if you overstuff these, they're just going to leak all over and you have a big old mess. So I would say to go on the side of what seems smaller, and I'm just putting it, if you notice, on 1/2 of my rectangle that I have because of course I'm going to want to pull these over. Now this I'm showing you is jam because you could always take that shortcut and I did this many times. I still have a daughter that does not like apple filling, so I had this raspberry jam in the fridge. It also doesn't have any added sugars to it, so I just put that on for her 3 because there's 6 of us in the family. We all get 3. This part's super important. I'm just taking water and I'm watering the edge that makes the flour kind of sticky and tacky so that it wants to stick to it. You really want to make sure that these are sealed or else in the baking process, the filling is going to run all out and you're going to be very disappointed when you have pie crust floating in apple compote. So really make sure that they're sticky, that you just put that water on and then you can just pick them up and make sure that you're pinching them together. We'll also make sure that we do a second pinch here in just a second. So I was able to fit about 9 on a pan. Yep, there you can just see, just adding a little water. It doesn't have to be tons, but it does have to be enough to kind of get the glue wanting to form into a paste. And make sure that you seal it well. Then you can pick it up and they're nice and sturdy and stick it onto your parchment paper or onto a greased pan. This part is important too, so just take a fork and make sure that you pinch along the edges because this is just a second way of securing your filling inside. If you skip this step, really it doesn't work well. I didn't pinch down one of the times that I did it quite well enough, and I did have the disaster that I spoke about with my pastry crust floating in apple compote. So make sure you do that. This I also found as a handy little tip. I just took a toothpick, but you could take anything sharp, and I just make a little bit of a steam vent in the top. So again, just it puts less stress on the sides. I baked them at 415 degrees for about 22 minutes. And then for the glaze, I simply took powdered sugar, mixed in a little bit of milk, and then drizzled it over the top. And the wonderful part about this is that if anything turned out a little bit of wonky in your pastry, this frosting just covers it all up and you can't see, and the messier the better. Look at these beautiful rustic looking apple hand pies. moment of truth. I wish you could hear how that flaky pie crust sounded. Look at that delicious gooey inside. So good. Okay guys, I hope you had as much fun making them as I did and eating them. I just had a bite. They're so good. So make these, let me know if you loved them, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.